everyone. Welcome to this webinar about 10x Developer. Eat your heart out. Uh, in today's webinar, I'm going to talk about using GitHub Copilot and GitHub Copilot Chat. My name is Thijs Limme, and so let's continue. So before we dive into GitHub Copilot, I want to first talk you through some evolution of coding. So when the developers first started coding, it was maybe on a command line tool or with text files, and they would write code, and they would have a very hard time writing correct code, and things would fail. And over the advance of time, developers would make their lives easier with embedding runtime code analysis, also checking code on compile time. But yeah, if you want to start coding, you have to read a lot of books to get the knowledge about how to write code. So also when Google started appearing and a website Stack Overflow, that gave developers a tool to get code snippets. So over the time we get a lot of new tooling. There's a lot more code. There's a lot more code being written. A lot of samples. So then, so with the evolution with AI, the models would embed all that knowledge into one big model, and that model can actually write code for you. So that's where GitHub Copilot comes in. So GitHub Copilot, it's a tool from Microsoft, and it's trained on a lot of code samples. It's trained on Stack Overflow. It's trained on GitHub code. So it knows a lot about coding. So if you this model, GitHub Copilot, it knows a lot about coding. If we write code, it's really nice if you have someone next to you constantly giving you advice on how to make things better. So you could also compare it with having a pair programmer constantly giving you suggestions, like it would happen if you would pair up with one of your colleagues, and it can also come up with really nice suggestions. So that's why I want to start off with a small demo for smart code suggestions of GitHub Copilot. So let's go to my code editor. I'm using Visual Studio Code as my code editor because it also contains good functionality of GitHub Copilot and the Copilot Chat. For this demo, I created an API. It's an API about the Wright brothers, a reference to the Copilot. And in this API, I have a planes controller. So here you have a planes controller with a list of airplanes. It has a method with getting the airplanes and also one for posting airplanes. So let's start off with adding a new plane to the list. So when I press enter, Copilot in an instant will give me a suggestion to add a new plane called the Wright Flyer 3 out of the box. I know I didn't have to do anything. So it's nice, it's adding code to my code base, but what I'm doing often is I want to add a property to this plane object. So let's head over to the plane object. So I want to add an image of the plane. So if I write public string, so it's already thought, hey, you have a plane, you might want to have an image URL. So I press tab, and there's my image URL. So nice, it added an image URL. But now I need to have the tedious task to add an image to all my planes. So now I press enter. GitHub would now already recommend me an image URL because it knows that I added this property to my model. So it updates the context of your coding session every time I make changes to my code base. So let me add images. These are non-existent images, but you get the drift. Copilot will suggest you pretty good things. So I have a REST API controller, and with REST you always have a get method, a post, and I now want to have the option to edit a airplane. And now I press enter, and Copilot knows it, and it will already suggest me to add a method for putting a airplane. And now it will also give me the implementation right out of the box, and I didn't have to do anything. So I can do this once again. So you have a put, but it also thinks about the delete. So here I'm deleting an airplane with this method. I'm not sure if it works, but if I look at it, it looks about accurate. But it's really nice that it already thought of this put method. And as a last example, when I want to log some things, because I want to see what happens on my system, and with this app, when I'm logging, I want to have a certain format. So between variables, I always put dashes. That's my format. But so this is my style of my code base of logging. So when I want to do it with a post, when I want to do logging, Copilot already see my style of writing the dashes, and it will recommend me a log with the same dashes. So this is an example with logging, but if you have a very large code base, it will do it with anything. So it will look at other files of your project, and it will try to apply the same style of. So Copilot also helps you to get a consistent way of coding. If I would add a new method, it said search. It will add the search method, Copilot thought of it, and it will directly also include the log with the dashes. So it knows how I'm writing my code. So these were 4 examples, and I think this already showed how powerful GitHub Copilot is. So let me go back to my slides. So I constantly am getting these suggestions, and I'm coding, and I'm not having to do all this tedious task of adding properties, changing properties. So what that helps me is I'm staying in the flow. I don't have to look up how putting something in how put works, how delete works for a list of items. It just suggests out of the box. So when I'm in my flow, I'm faster at coding. I can code for a longer amount of time without being frustrated, and that eventually increases my happiness of coding. And that also means growing as a developer, I think. So that was coding suggestions. What GitHub Copilot also can do is writing comments, and it can then translate it to code. So I have a few examples of that. So let's go back to the code base. So let's say, so you have an airplane here, and the airplanes, they have a year to it. So let's say we want to get all the airplanes from a specific year. So let's add a new method. I will put get planes from a specific year. So it will suggest me to add a get method with a year property. And then it will also add the method itself. And it also included the log once again. So this is in this way I can steer Copilot to do something I'm asking, and not just giving me a random method. So I have one more example. So I can also make some changes inside a method. So if I'm posting something, and I'm posting a plane that already exists, I want to throw an error because the plane already exists. So let me go in my method. I'll add a throw error if plane already exists. So when the plane already exists, it checks it by ID. It will return conflict. So an ID is unique. So I want to validate it by its name. So I'll add by name. So it will give me existing plane. I will now expect it to give me a sample of, yeah. So if I do if, it knows, hey, you want to return something probably, and it returns a bad request because the plane already exists by name. So these were two samples of how you can steer Copilot in the right direction by adding comments. So I showed you how Copilot works with two demos. And I want to go to one aspect of using AI and also having AI give you suggestions based on a code base that's yours. And I hear a lot of questions like, if I use Copilot, will my IP or will my data or code base, my intelligence be on the street? And always with these things, it depends. For a personal license, the user gets all the benefits of using Copilot, but there are some privacy, data security aspects of it. But if you do a business license, you can check as a administrator of the Copilot licenses. You can check off some check marks that have to do with data and privacy. So less data or more like metric data is being collected by Copilot. And what's new, it's coming in the February, I think February 2024, there's an enterprise license. So an enterprise can, on organization level, it can specify how Copilot should behave for their developers. And to be able to do this, you have to have GitHub Enterprise enabled. So having that out of the way, and just see how GitHub, how powerful Copilot can be, I can also show you a demo of GitHub Copilot Chat, which is in public beta. So anyone that's now that now licenses Copilot can already make use of GitHub Copilot Chat. So let's go back to my demo. So inside my Visual Studio, I have this chat window, which is already installed. So I have a chat interface now with GitHub Copilot. And GitHub Copilot can then answer questions for me. So, hi Copilot, what is my code base about? So it understands that my code base is a web API with a planes controller, and it contains some methods for doing REST. So that's nice. So if I'm new to a code base, I have a lot of questions. I have to understand what code is doing inside a large code base, and that can be hard. You might have to ask colleagues that have to make time for you to onboard you on a project. So I can ask Copilot to just explain me something. So let's go to my put method. It's pretty complex, but maybe Copilot can explain that to me. So let me explain this. Oh, I press right click, by the way, and then I said Copilot explain this. This will now put these snippets to the chat, and it will start explaining what this put method does. So this is the way of having a quick select button to do this. Or it's an action that's with a right click. But I can also ask it right away in the chat. So I selected the put method on the right, and I'll explain it. Can you explain the selected codes? So it knows what code I selected, and it starts to explain that code. So there are multiple ways of interacting with GitHub Copilot. So as a developer, you might be asked to write unit tests for a specific code snippet. And that's something Copilot can also do. So for this delete method, I want to add the unit test, and Copilot can do that for me. So here I have a button to generate tests. So it's gonna try to do that in line. So here it thought about initializing a controller, having some planes, and then when you delete one, it should not contain the one in the list. So it's a unit test that could work for me. So I'll create it. So GitHub Copilot, so I pressed create, and GitHub Copilot added a method, added file for me that contains this test. I can also ask it. So I will start an inline chat. I want to have more tests for my delete method. So I'll ask it, can you think of more test cases? So these are for my other plane controller methods, which is nice because I didn't test them. So it generated about 6 tests that I can execute in my unit test in an instant. But Copilot can also do more things. I will close these down. So if I want to get an airplane by year, let me go by year, and I might make a mistake in my code. So instead of writing where year is year, I'll write name is year. Now it will complain about some syntax. Let me do toString here. Oh. So this thing is not working for me. I see that it's not getting the planes by year. So I can ask Copilot, can you fix it for me? So what Copilot understood is that this method is for get by year, and it saw that, hey, you use name here, and then it also gives you a suggestion to fix it. So here it gives me a suggestion to fix the method, and here it's back again to year. So it can also help you troubleshoot a method. If Copilot thinks like, hey, it might be incorrect. And of course, a lot of people want that if you write code, you need to write documentation with it, and that's a very tedious task. So maybe Copilot can also do that for us. So let me go to Copilot and say generate docs. So now Copilot generated the docs. I think it's correct what the method is doing. So I think that's it for GitHub Copilot Chat. So it's really powerful, and it gives you even more possibilities of using an AI programming tool to your advantage. So my presentation is about 10x, and 10x is really fake. Is it 10 times more productive? Is it writing 10 times more code? Is it being 10 times more happy? I made a little calculation because 10x is really subjective. So what I said, like staying in the flow for a long time, yeah, that's really a 2 times gain. Having faster completion on tedious tasks, repeating code, also times 2. Having Copilot where you can brainstorm about code, where you can find issues, can generate tests for you. Yeah, if you do some quick maths, it ends up at about 10 times. So that's referencing back to my title of the presentation. But of course, I've been using GitHub Copilot for over a year now. I think I was part of the first beta. When Microsoft announced it, I subscribed right away. And when using it at first glance, I was already very productive. It was already giving me pretty solid suggestions and was not always correct. But I felt already empowered by it. So when I now work at customers, I feel a lot more satisfied because I can get a lot of things done now in a day. where I would sometimes struggle to, or I felt like I didn't do enough in a day. I feel more productive. In general, I experience less stress. So yeah, I think when you use Copilot, also GitHub research that people that use Copilot are less stressed and experience less of a burnouts. I think it was like 60% less burnouts when using Copilot. And I have the overall feeling of having superpowers, which is really nice, of course. But now it almost feels normal using Copilot after using it a year. So those superpowers disappeared a little bit, but still it's really nice to having it write code for me. So what if you want to get started with using GitHub Copilot? It's really easy. You can get started in 2 minutes, really. You can start by scanning this QR code, and this will lead you to the page where you can buy a license, I guess. So I'm putting it out there for a little while so you can scan it. So I think this is enough time. You can go ahead after the presentation to configure it. It's really easy. So GitHub Copilot is currently supported for all major IDEs, and GitHub Copilot, so that's for the GitHub Copilot completion. GitHub Copilot Chat is still in beta, but it's getting rolled out to more IDEs, and I think you will probably see it appearing in the next couple of months. I also want to show you how to install it in your GitHub or in Visual Studio Code. So you go over to the extensions in GitHub in Visual Studio Code. If you then type GitHub Copilot, you press install, and when you install it, you will be asked to log in with your GitHub account. And if you have logged in, you're already ready to go. So you can literally do it in 2 minutes if you are really fast, but more realistic, 5 minutes, I would say. So that was it for this webinar. I want to thank you. We also have a magazine that's out, which you can download on our website. And I also put a link to my examples in the right bottom corner. My name is Thijs Limme, and I hope you enjoyed this webinar about GitHub Copilot.